As I just said in the previous slide, both monosaccharides and disaccharides are both soluble in water. However, polysaccharides, and we can think of poly meaning many, many sugars. Polysaccharides, on the other hand, are actually considered insoluble in water. Right, so that's pretty much one of the differences. Now, polysaccharides pretty much are actually long chains of simple sugars all combined together. Right, so even though polysaccharides, yes, they will have their the hydroxyl functional group, but because of the arrangement of this polysaccharide, right, or as we can say here, complex carbohydrates, right? That's really what they are. That's what makes them pretty much insoluble in water. Right? Now, plants actually store this chemical energy in the form of these polysaccharides. Right? So plants store polysaccharides in the form of starches. Right? So in the form of starches, now these starches are actually pretty much a mixture of two different types of polysaccharides. Those being the amylopectin and the second one being amylose. Okay. Now both amylose and the amylopectin are really repeating, right? And what I'm going to do is, remember, as we said, glucose molecules, that hexagon shape, and just for simplicity here, I'm going to draw them as a straight chain. So there's a whole bunch of glucose molecules here, right? Notice this hexagon shape, right? And they keep going. Right, and of course they can actually curl as such, let's say, but we're not going to worry about that. Anyhow, so here we have pretty much our simplified diagram of what we call a polysaccharide, and in fact, both amylopectin and the amylose are pretty much a long chain of polysaccharide, or a long chain of monosaccharides, right? Glucose molecules that form a big long chain. So all these repeating units, these so-called subunits, or should we call them monomers, right? Monomers, right? So this whole long chain is a polymer, and each individual one represents an actual monomer of this big long polymer. And both amylopectin and the amylose are made up of glucose monosaccharides in a big long chain. Now, animals, on the other hand, right? So animals, including us, right? Animals, right? We store pretty much some of this chemical energy in the form of glucose chains, long glucose chains, our so-called polysaccharide storage. We call it glycogen. And again, glycogen is also a big, long, repeating polymer of glucose molecules. Now, we store pretty much glycogen pretty much in our liver, right, in liver cells, right, in some types of white blood cells, and, of course, muscle cells are pretty much, sorry about my writing, in muscle cells are pretty much where we actually, as humans, as animals, store our glycogen. Right? So as we said, pretty much these big long chain, this polysaccharide, poly meaning many sugars. What are these many sugars? These many sugars are made up of glucose. Right? Each individual glucose is known as a monomer. Right? It was also known as a monosaccharide. But in terms of small subunits within a big long particle, these small subunits are specifically called monomers. And monomers pretty much is just the individual pieces that make up this big long polymer. And a polymer just pretty much is a bunch. It's a molecule that's composed of many little subunits. And these, as I said, these subunits being glucose. So plant starches, pretty much a very common component in food, right? So in terms of starches, right, think about foods like your rice, things that contain like a wheat flour, anything that, in potatoes, cornstarch, right? So these are pretty much places in which, where you can actually find these starches from actually plants. Now, the thing is with polysaccharides, they're too large to be absorbed. So think of it, you take in this and your body can't really digest it all. So what happens is in the digestive system, right, for animals, we will break down these subunits. We will break down these individual monomers, right, as individual glucose molecules, these glucose subunits, and allow our bodies or the cells within our body to be able to absorb each glucose individually. And that's really how our body will break down a big long chain of a polysaccharide. And this is pretty much a process called digestion. Other types of polysaccharides, and we're just going to touch upon them. One of them is cellulose. Pretty much plant cell wall, right? Plant cell wall is actually made up of cellulose. Right? Plant cell wall, right? And this is pretty much the polysaccharide in which they're comprised of. Now, cellulose pretty much very similar to that of amylose. But the thing is, the glucose subunits are bonded in a way where in humans, we cannot break down cellulose. We don't have the ability, right? But however, you have animals like cows, pretty much sheep, right? They can break down this cellulose. However, we cannot as humans, right? So pretty much, in terms of organisms as ourselves, right? We pretty much are able to kind of allow pretty much cellulose fibers to pass through our digestive system. And this is pretty much what we call roughage, right? It's pretty much what we call fiber when we're referring to fiber as well. So pretty much when we are eating things like, vegetables, grains, fruits, right? So pretty much vegetables, grains, fruits, right? This is where we've got some of the fiber, the so-called roughage. And this is very healthy for humans, right? So what happens is really it helps us with digestion, right? And it also helps with the elimination of waste, and it also prevents constipation. Another polysaccharide that I do kind of want to touch upon is Shaitan. And chitin pretty much is really the exterior skeleton, right? Found in some insects, in some things like lobsters and shrimp, in some mushrooms as well. Now, chitin, pretty much tough material that humans find also difficult to digest. That's one of the reasons why when we eat the lobster, we pretty much, we crack the shell and we eat what's inside that.